It is June 28th, 1914. Sarajevo, a young man steps off a car and pulls a trigger. One bullet, one moment, one death. And from that single gunshot, the entire world caught fire. But here's what no one ever asks. What if that trigger was never pulled? What if Archduke Franz Ferdinand simply survived? Would we be living in a completely different world right now? Would the borders you know, the countries you live in, the technology surrounding you, would any of it even exist? The answer will disturb you, because the world without World War I is not the peaceful paradise you're imagining.
With me.
What you're about to discover will change the way you see history forever. To understand what would have been lost or saved, we first need to understand what the world looked like before the war. It is 1914. Europe is a powder keg, for massive empires rule over almost half the planet. The Ottoman Empire, the Austro-Hungarian Empire, the Russian Empire, the German Empire. These are not just governments, they are titans. Ancient, crumbling, and dangerously armed. And they are all allergic to each other. Beneath every royal dinner table, every diplomatic handshake, every carefully worded treaty, there is rage. There is suspicion. There is hunger for power that no map could ever contain. Nationalism is spreading like a plague. Small nations want freedom. Empires want control. And in the middle of it all, a tangled web of secret alliances that guaranteed if one nation goes to war, everyone goes to war. Europe was not heading toward peace. It was heading toward an explosion. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand was not the cause of World War I. It was merely the match. And if that match had never been struck, the powder keg was still there, waiting. Here is the shocking truth that most history books bury in a footnote. The assassination of Franz Ferdinand almost failed, not once, but twice, on the very same morning. Earlier that day, a different assassin threw a bomb at the Archduke's motorcade. It bounced off the car. It exploded under the vehicle behind him. Franz Ferdinand survived. He should have gone home. His aides begged him to leave. He refused. He insisted on visiting the injured officers in the hospital, and on that detour, a wrong turn, an unplanned stop, a car stalling on a street corner, and Gavrilo Princip, the 19-year-old assassin who had already given up for the day, happened to be standing right there. A wrong turn. That is all it took to start a war that killed 20 million people. So what if the driver had taken the right turn? What if Franz Ferdinand had simply gone home? What if history blinked? Let's follow that thread and see exactly where it leads. Franz Ferdinand lives. June 28, 1914, a close call. A diplomatic incident, a scandal in Sarajevo, but no war. Austria-Hungary is furious. They blame Serbia for harboring nationalists. Tensions rise, ultimatums are issued. But without an assassination, without blood spilled on a cobblestone street, there is no fire, no mobilization, no declaration of war. The alliance system holds its breath and exhales. For now, but here's where it gets dangerously complicated. Because the causes of World War I don't disappear just because Franz Ferdinand didn't die. The empires are still rotting from the inside. The colonial rivalries are still burning. Germany is still building the largest navy the world has ever seen, and Britain is terrified. Historians call this structural inevitability. The war, they argue, was not waiting for an assassination. It was waiting for any reason, any excuse, any spark. Without 1914, the war likely begins in 1916, or 1918, or perhaps some other name triggers it, some other death, some other border dispute, some other act of desperation by a crumbling empire. The world does not escape the war, it only delays it. And a delayed war might have been far more catastrophic than the one we know. But let's go deeper. Let's say, against all odds, the war is avoided entirely. No World War I, not in 1914, not in 1916, not ever in that form. What does the world look like? The Ottoman Empire survives. And this single fact alone reshapes the entire modern Middle East. There is no Sykes-Picot Agreement, the secret 1916 deal between Britain and France that arbitrarily carved up Arab lands and drew the borders of Iraq, Syria, Lebanon, and Palestine on a napkin. The borders you see on a Middle East map today, they don't exist. No artificial borders means no artificial nations, which means no destabilized Iraq, no colonial resentment festering for a century, possibly, no Gulf Wars, possibly. A fundamentally different relationship between the West and the Islamic world. But here is the mystery that haunts every historian who dares to imagine this world. Without World War I, Russia never falls. The Russian Revolution of 1917 was fueled almost entirely by the catastrophic human cost of the war, millions dead. A czar who sent peasants to fight with no rifles. A population broken by hunger and grief. No war, no revolution. The Romanov dynasty survives. And if the Romanovs survive, Vladimir Lenin never returns from exile. Leon Trotsky remains a writer in New York. Joseph Stalin remains a minor criminal in Georgia. The Soviet Union, the Cold War, the nuclear arms race, the Iron Curtain, none of it happens. Let that sink in for a moment. And now we arrive at the most staggering consequence of all. Without World War I, there is no Adolf Hitler. Not the Hitler we know in 1914. Hitler is a failed artist in Vienna, aimless, rejected, a nobody. It is the war that gives him purpose, the trenches that radicalize him, the defeat of Germany that becomes his obsession, the Treaty of Versailles, the humiliating peace agreement that stripped Germany of land, military, and dignity, is what creates the conditions for the Nazi Party to rise. No World War I means no Treaty of Versailles. No Treaty of Versailles means no stab in the back myth, no economic ruin, no desperate German population searching for someone to blame. Hitler becomes a painter, a drifter, a historical footnote no one ever reads, and 6 million Jewish lives are never taken. 11 million people, Jewish men and women and children, Roma, disabled individuals, political prisoners, are never marched into gas chambers. The Holocaust, the most systematic campaign of murder in human history, it never happens. Take a breath, because the weight of that truth, the weight of what one wrong turn in Sarajevo set into motion, is almost too heavy to hold. But here is where the story turns, and where history reveals its darkest irony. A world without World War I is not automatically a better world. It is simply a different catastrophe. The 1918 Spanish flu killed more people than the entire war, somewhere between 50 and 100 million people worldwide. But it was accelerated by troop movements, overcrowded military camps, and global displacement. Without the war, does it still spread? Perhaps. But perhaps it kills 10 million instead of 100 million. Penicillin, the antibiotic that has saved hundreds of millions of lives, was discovered in 1928, partly because Alexander Fleming was a battlefield medic in World War I. He watched men die from infected wounds and became consumed by the need to stop it. No war, possibly no penicillin. Not yet. The women's rights movement in the West accelerated dramatically because of the war. Women entered factories, drove ambulances, ran farms, and managed entire economies while men died on the front. That economic power fueled the demand for voting rights. No war, and women's suffrage may have been delayed by decades. This is the terrifying complexity of history. Even from devastation, things are born that save lives, change lives, free lives. Remove the devastation, and you remove the breakthroughs that came with it. History is never clean. It is never simply good or bad. It is a chain, and every link matters. And here is the deepest mystery of this entire thought experiment. Could any of it have been different? Historians are divided into two camps, and they have been arguing for a century. One camp says, yes, A few different decisions by a handful of men in a handful of rooms could have stopped everything. Kaiser Wilhelm II of Germany could have restrained his generals. Tsar Nicholas II and the Kaiser were cousins. They exchanged desperate personal telegrams in the final hours before mobilization, signing them Willie and Nicky. Two cousins, both emperors, begging each other not to let it happen. It happened anyway, the other camp says. No, the forces were too large. The system was too broken. The war was not an accident. It was an inevitability, wearing the costume of an accident. And this is the mystery that never gets resolved. Because we cannot rerun history. We can only look at what happened and ask ourselves what it means that so much hung on a driver taking a wrong turn on a Sunday morning. 20 million people died in World War I. Say that number slowly. 20 million people. Each one of them had a name, a mother, a laugh, a favorite song, a dream they never lived to chase. And every single one of those lives was connected through a chain of decisions, alliances, empires, and accidents. To one wrong turn on a June morning in 1914, we talk about history as though it is inevitable, as though the past was always going to happen exactly the way it did. But it wasn't. It almost didn't. And that is the most haunting thing of all. Not that the war happened, but how easily it could have been avoided. How close the world came to a different story, and how, in the end, ordinary human choices, pride, stubbornness, fear, a refusal to turn the car around, rewrote the fate of every human being alive. Today, you exist because of this war. Your borders, your language, your politics, your medicine, your rights. All of it shaped by those 4 years of fire. History didn't happen to them. It made you one bullet, one wrong turn, one war, and the entire modern world followed. We study history not to mourn what was lost, but to understand the terrifying, beautiful, fragile responsibility of the present. Because right now, somewhere in the world, someone is making a decision, a small one, a quiet one, and no one yet knows what it will start. If this made you think differently about history, share it. Because the stories we understand are the ones we're less likely to repeat. This has been a journey through the road not taken, through the war that changed everything, and the peace that never came. Thank you for watching, and remember, history is never just the past. It is always a warning.